Some call him a fool for unloading one of the oddest illegal strikes in UFC Championship history. Others sympathize with him in spite his one moment of madness. Most will agree that he's still the finest example of a bantamweight fighter on the planet. This is what UFC fighters really think of Petr Yan. Sean O'Malley is well and truly on a slow rise to the top of the 135 weight class. Sure, a lot of people see him as a future contender within the stacked bantamweight title picture, but if you ask Sugar Sean himself, he'll surely tell you that he's content to continue improving, and there's no rush to make good on his obvious potential. When asked about how he measures up against the best of the best, he, like many others, declared Petr Yan to be a true champion of the division instead of the reigning champion Sterling.
I feel like I could take... or Peter's not the champ. I think Petr Yan's the champ. That's in my division. That's kind of who I feel is the champion. Yeah. They're gonna have a rematch. We'll see who's gonna be the champion of that. But dude, I think I beat Peter. I think I beat TJ. I think I beat Corey. I think I beat all these guys. My skill set is there. I'm there. I'm 26 too. I'm getting better.
And though he did show some degree of respect for the Russian skill set, he also made it crystal clear that he sees himself as the better fighter of the two. All that remains now is for O'Malley to pick up the pace and beat some ranked opponents and attempt to prove it when it matters most. If you want to talk about compelling stylistic matchups at 135 right now, look no further than a showdown between the legendary striking styles of TJ Dillashaw and the watertight technical prowess of Petr Yan. And though certain pieces will need to fall into place to make this one a reality, when you ask for his opinion on Yan, Dillashaw expressed that he saw his fellow contender as a good stylistic matchup for him.
Yeah, man, I'm pumped on it. I think it's a really good fight for me. I'm excited for it. Style matches up perfectly for me.
Dude, that is a fight.
I'm excited.
While he admitted that he's been guilty of counting Yan out in the past, even with that being the case, this former champion believes that he has the approach needed to dissect the surgical striking excellence that Yan brings to the table. As one of the most dynamic and creative strikers the sport has ever known, if anyone has the style needed to drag Yan into a real firefight, you'd best believe that TJ Dillashaw is on that list. Prior to his eventual capture of UFC Gold, Petr Yan called the legendary Uriah Faber, battering him down before eventually scoring the third-round head kick knockout. It was no doubt a tough pill for the former WEC champ Faber to swallow, but upon being asked about his matchup against Yan post-fight, Uriah was full of praise for his conqueror, telling Ariel Helwani that he sees him as a future champion at 135.
The fight with Peter is going to happen over and over and over again in our gym. We've got... how many guys we have at that weight class that are top contenders? I mean, I really feel like Cody Stamen and Song Yadong and Cody Garbrandt are all bad matchups for Peter. But he's a tough bastard. I gotta give a lot of credit to Yan.
Faber's prediction would, of course, come to light shortly after, although the California kid has not been seen in action since. Whether he will attempt to fight his way back into the title contention or not remains to be seen, but with his legacy set in stone, this icon has very little left to prove. The man who is set to welcome Yan back to the octagon, this time with the interim bantamweight title on the line, Corey Sandhagen is under no illusions about his place within the division at present. Despite losing out by the narrowest of margins against TJ Dillashaw, the loss to Aljamain Sterling on his record, Sandhagen agrees with the general opinion that Petr Yan is the most impressive bantamweight on the planet. He definitely sees rematches with both Dillashaw and Sterling in his future, but for his extremely talented contender, the interim belt that he would be fighting for next carries with it more weight than usual, given the reputation of the man who will join him inside the cage at UFC 267.
I think everyone sees Yan as the champ of the division, the best in the division, so I think in this case it will.
As respectful as can be, one would hope that the stylistic dream fight produces the goods once the action is underway on October 30th, because on paper, you'd be more hard-pressed to find a more scintillating pairing all year. He may be rating himself for a dip into the flyweight division, but Cody Garbrandt remains a relevant name at bantamweight nonetheless. And in the wake of his longtime trainer and friend Uriah Faber's defeat at the hands of Petr Yan, no love was actually involved in the backstage altercation with the Russian, as the pair exchanged words before they were eventually separated. Following this, Cody put out a tweet stating that Yan was too slow to be competitive with him, and Yan, being Yan, did not back down. It's hard to know if these two will ever find their way into an octagon together, but as two of the best boxers in the sport, if they did, we'd be willing to bet on it being a pretty memorable thing, that's for sure. Kaikara France and a 125 debut are no doubt front and center in Garbrandt's thoughts, but one never knows on how things will play out in the long run. Given just how strong bantamweight is right now, it's easy to forget that Henry Cejudo technically never lost his belt in status as a champion. He's retired, of course, but even with that being technically the case, every few months he teases the MMA world with the prospect of a return, never straying too far away from the headlines after each major event. And though, in true Triple C fashion, he called him an ugly potato, just 10 seconds before doing so, Cejudo gave props to Petr Yan for the way he handled Sterling in their first outing, giving Aho a little chance of turning around when they eventually rematch.
That fight, I thought Petr Yan was fighting a great fight. I think kudos to him. He was patient. His defense was not. He was well aware of Aljamain's elbows, spinning elbows, kind of knees flying through the middle, even though Aljamain did catch him.
Cejudo, for all of his bravado and boisterousness, is an interesting a mind for the sport as he can be. And in his analysis of Yan versus Sterling, he praised Yan as a high-caliber athlete, echoing the rest of the MMA world in declaring him as the best active 135-pound fighter in the game. All that remains to see now is if Cejudo will take the issue with that billing and mount a comeback. That said, he does appear to be more interested in making a debut as a featherweight in his attempt to become the first fighter to hold titles across 3 different weight classes. You know you're doing something right when one of the most technically proficient fighters in mixed martial arts history calls you his toughest potential matchup. Demetrius Johnson has always been an open book when it comes to giving his thoughts on the current climate of his sport. And when asked about the UFC bantamweight that would stand as his hardest matchup at present, he was quick to give the nod to Petr Yan.
Out of all those title holders at 135, who would be your toughest test?
Probably Petr Yan. His hands are fucking good.
Citing that his hands and excellent technical ability, Mighty Mouse, though aware of his threats, seemed to relish the prospect of testing himself against such a well-rounded fighter. Of course, with him tied to one championship, the notion of seeing DJ in there with Yan is virtually impossible, but even still, it's hard not to wonder at how that matchup would play out. Would it be the size, power, and pressure of the Russian, or would Johnson's mastery of each facet of the MMA skill set make up for his limited physicality? The fact that we'll never know seems like quite a shame, doesn't it? And finally, we come to perhaps the most relevant name on our list and the most recent opponent of Petr Yan, Aljamain Sterling. Indeed, it's hard to be overly sympathetic to the reigning bantamweight champion when he didn't actually win the title through his performance inside the cage. But for most fans, it was the manner in which he conducted himself upon being declared champion that instantly made him one of the most disliked fighters on the roster. Ask the Funkmaster himself and he will tell you that, lest we forget it, it was Petr Yan and not him who committed the foul mid-fight to bring the action to its end. In his own eyes, Yan should be the one who receives criticism and not him.
It's not your fault that this guy did something illegal. You did nothing wrong. And I was like, you know what? You're right. You know, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything wrong. You know, I went in there, I fought an honest fight, and it wasn't going well in that 4th round, but we still had another round to go.
And while he does have a point to at least some extent, parading it around with a title that's not really yours was always bound to drive the fans insane. Obviously, a clean win over Petr Yan would have changed everything for Sterling, but for the time being, just learn to read the room. And that'll just about do it for this video. Remember, if you guys enjoyed this list and want to help MMA Realm reach the top of the MMA YouTube game, be sure to leave a like and comment before subscribing to the channel so you don't miss our weekly uploads.